it's super exciting to just hear what you have to say, and I know that there's probably a lot of listeners who are like very interested at hearing your story and whatnot. But for the people who might not know who you are, um, and someone who hasn't seen your YouTube channel, how would you explain who you are and what you do?
I am a lifelong audio video nerd. That's the thing I've loved: cameras, microphones, all that forever. And then I was a high school digital media teacher for about 10 years. And I started a YouTube channel at a point during that. And then there just came a time when the YouTube channel was growing and teaching was becoming a little bit crazy. And I made the leap to full time YouTube, where I get to talk about all the audio video stuff that I love. And I don't have to go to staff meetings.
That
It's
what a
great.
nice thing to avoid staff meetings. I used to my previous work. I used to go to staff meetings every Tuesday, and they were the bane of my existence. I did not want to do
Yeah,
them. So
not the most fun.
that is really nice. You've mentioned you have been a lifelong audio video nerd. And I know that you started out with like an 8 millimeter Sony Handycam camera. Um, how old were you when you picked that up, and what were the things that you were making with that camera?
I was 4, and it was my parents were borrowing it from my grandparents. So if they went on vacation, they would like borrow the 8 millimeter Handycam from my grandparents. And at first, the thing that blew my mind was we could do something, and then my dad would hook it up to the TV that night, and we would rewatch what we did that day. And it was like the reliving of a thing. I don't know if we went somewhere neat or whatever it might be. Like even just like, here's your third birthday or your fourth birthday, and here's the cake that you were eating. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember that cake. It was so good. Like just getting to redo that was something about that was really awesome. And then it was like my dad who would take the camera and just do goofy stuff. Like he could do little stop motion jump cuts where it's like, he'd have me stand somewhere, stop recording, like get out of the thing, hit recording, and then I disappear. Or he would like lean over the edge of a balcony and like zoom in real slow and like he was falling off the edge or something. And that was kind of groundbreaking because it was, it's very basic, but it was like, oh, this isn't just for capturing stuff that we did and reliving it, but you can actually kind of create a reality and do different things. And I don't know what it was. Something clicked and I loved it. And I loved the mechanicalness of the cameras. I loved like the tape popping out. I like the whole thing, like touching the camera, using the camera, figuring it out. The stuff I filmed as a 4 or a 5-year-old is literally most of the time the camera's zoomed in all the way and it's just me running around. So it's just like the Blair Witch Project, but it's still really fun.
Yeah, and it sounds like your dad was doing like pretty creative stuff too. So a question that I have for you is, did you grow up in a creative household?
No,
No.
like
Okay.
not at all. I mean, like not really.
Yeah.
Like my mom is an accountant. My dad was a mailman, and then like retired early and was on disability for a while. So it's like nothing. It was all very bare bones and very practical. But the thing that I really loved about my parents was that they were both curious about stuff, and same with my grandparents. Like even into their 90s, like my grandparents were just always like, how does this thing work? My grandpa got into like mining and rocks and rock polishing and all this stuff. And it's like, it was really cool just to be around people who were interested in things. And that was the thing my dad had. Like he loved working on cars. He loved just taking stuff apart and building his own versions of things. And it was like, oh, just like that curiosity. Even if it wasn't like no one else was interested as much as I was in like audio video production or music or anything like that. But that didn't really matter because it was just like be interested in something. And that, yeah, I mean, that was fun. I'm really happy that curiosity was a part of my upbringing, because if you don't have that, it's sort of hard to try anything new.
Absolutely. I mean, from the moment you picked up your camera, you start seeing your dad film things, and then you're able to relive moments from the moment you started making videos at the age of 4. As you got older, how did that interest progress through audio and visual? And what were the things that you started to really work on going through your teenage years, maybe?
God, you ask like the best questions. They're so like this is stuff I haven't. It's so cool. It's so fun to think about this. So thank you for your questions. Um, yeah, the progression was pretty fun because I was lucky that I liked it, and learned how to do stop motion, which was great because like I don't have any brothers or sisters, and there's only so much like acting you can do by yourself. But those old 8 millimeters, you can just, if you just double click the record button or double press the record button, it'll just do one frame on the tape. So you could do like Lego stop motion or whatever, like Hot Wheels stop motion things, and that was really fun. So I started doing that a lot on my own. And then when I was about 11 years old, I met who would become like my best friend, who ended up getting like a master's degree in cinematography from some prestigious school and stuff. So he went for it, but we were both into cameras and movies. And so every weekend it was just going to each other's houses and making like the worst movies. It's always like an FBI agent. There's always like somebody needs to chase someone. And it basically, we're making like Steven Seagal movies, but the differentiating factor is like we were 11, but it had the same plots that like his movies have now. Fewer like strippers and things though, of course. But the the thing that was crazy is we would watch movies and we would film our movies, and there was that disconnect between like, why doesn't the thing we make look like the Hollywood movie? There were a lot of reasons why, but it really was, that was where we would start to figure out like, oh my God, lighting is a thing, shot framing is a thing. There were no computers or anything to edit on at the time, but just shooting for the edit or editing in camera kind of became a thing. And then audio was huge because it's like, okay, cool, I'm holding the 8 millimeter camera, you're 25 feet away and mumbling some line about like whatever the FBI agent is saying in the movie, and it's like no one knows what you're saying. And we realized, oh my gosh, we need to get better at all of this stuff. And then into our teenage years, then you start trying to add in some music, and and eventually like the later part of high school is when like iMovie 1 came out for me. So it's like, oh, you could put this on a computer and not lose quality every time you edit something. And it's like that was such a game changer going from VCR to computer. I think that, yeah. So I mean, that was the progression, I guess. Like you just realize how bad you are at it, and just try to keep getting better. And you're always bad at something, so there's always something to get better at.
At some point, you stopped doing stop motion.
Yeah.
I had to throw in some kind of pun because I want to talk about your YouTube channel here in a little bit. I'm always trying to do that. And so you were curious about all of these different things. There's something so fun about being able to ask the question of like, why does this not look like this movie? And it's pursuing that curiosity and kind of figuring out what needs to happen in order to change to make it look like the movies, right? I think there's so many different creative people who hit a point in their career or their hobby where they're like, I want it to look better. I want it to feel better. I want it to sound better. And it's so important to be able to ask those questions in order to advance. Were there moments for you and your friend growing up where you were able to kind of ask those questions to each other and kind of dissect different things? And at what point did you start dissecting movies and realize, oh, I can see that it's the lighting, or I can see that it's the movie or the audio?
I think a big part, because this is at this point, like when we're in, middle school, early high school, it's like around the year 2000-ish. And so DVD players were just kind of coming out, and DVDs with bonus features and director's commentaries, that was huge. Though that was amazing. Like you could just watch a movie and the director's there just telling you like how hard it was to maneuver the camera around something, or how they had to, whatever they had to do to make a shot possible. So that was big, like getting to just, I don't know, have all those extras that DVDs have, because that was such a thing. Like you would get a double disc DVD and it would have a whole disc of just extra stuff. That was totally a game changer. The one that really sticks out to me is Fight Club, because that was one of the first movies where I couldn't like ignore how it looked. And it's just a David Fincher style thing, but it's like it's super widescreen. There's these crazy close-ups. There's the crazy lighting, super interesting framing, and that like it jumped out at me just how that movie looked. And I remember taking then, I was like, okay, I think I like this like widescreen letterbox thing. I didn't know what it was, and my camera couldn't really do it. So I had a wide angle lens on my handy cam. And so I took electrical tape and put it at the top and bottom to try to like make my own black bars, which didn't work at all because the bars themselves were fuzzy because it was just this thing like up against the lens. And then the camera started focusing on like the inside of the tape. So then it was everything's out of focus except for these like hairy, because it's like hairy and dust, whatever's on the tape. So it didn't work at all. But even that, I was like, wait, and then learning like, why is it even framed that way? Like part of it is creative, part of it is practical for like actual projection purposes. And it's like things like that, which some of it just comes out of boredom. You're just sitting there and you're just like, what? I remember watching, I think this is pre-YouTube. I used to watch the Home Shopping Network whenever they would do camcorders because there was nothing else on or to do. And you would always see that, and it drove me crazy because they would always have like, here's a VHS-C camcorder, and they're talking about how great it is. And I was like, always trying to learn, like, okay, what does it have that's better than my camera? Like, again, no YouTube reviews. It's not a thing at the time. And so they would always do these comparisons where they would be like, oh, look at the low light performance between this $600 JVC camcorder and our $500,000 studio camera. And they'd like turn off the lights in the studio and the studio camera would be pitch black and the little camcorder, you could still see things. And they're like, wow, this really puts our camera to shame. And I remember thinking like, why, if that's true, why is this studio buying hundreds of thousands of dollars of camera gear? Why aren't they just running the studio off of these $600 VHS-C camcorders? There has to be a reason. And then of course, I mean, it's all marketing and sales, and it wasn't like, there was that part of it, but it's also like, yeah, okay, there's a reason this camera suddenly auto adjusts to grainy footage, whereas the studio camera doesn't auto adjust. So everything just becomes black, and like things like that, just sort of being curious about how things work and why they work that way. And, I don't know. It's almost like a critical thinking exercise too. And when you start breaking apart the marketing part of things, I think that played a big role in it. And then DVDs and just making stuff. Like every time you make stuff, you make new mistakes, you get a little better at other things, you mess up at other things. That's the best way to learn, I think.
I agree. I feel really strongly about this because I've always been a really curious individual. You can ask my parents, as I've torn apart probably every toy that I've ever been given, and it's probably driven them nuts.
Could you put them back together after you took them apart?
That would be the goal. Sometimes that wouldn't happen. I think my hope was originally to put it back together, but that wasn't always the case. There is something so beautiful about curiosity, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit later. But going through high school, you're in middle school, you're very curious about cameras, you're very curious about film. Were there other things outside of the camera space that made you curious, whether that's a hobby or a sport or something else?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was never into sports, although now I wish I had been. But I was really into music. That was a really cool thing. And so like around freshman year, I think it was, of high school, I started like playing guitar and learning a little bit about the bass, and that was really fun. And just trying, I had another friend who was sort of learning at the same time, and so we were teaching ourselves how to play very terribly, and that was kind of cool. And it sort of seems unrelated, but I don't know, somehow the two things, like music and audio video production, every time I try to branch out and do something that's like, this is not connected at all, in some weird way, it ends up coming back. And so it's like, maybe it's just the learning process, I guess. But I've always like been a collector of hobbies, definitely like was it like a jack of all trades, master of none situation for me. But it's fun. I like trying new things and exploring stuff, and you never know. And I think sometimes people can feel like, especially now, it really seems like if a hobby's not going to make you money or get a return on the investment, it's not worth doing. But I think it's really important to try something. And if you find out you don't like it and you don't want to do it anymore, that's cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that. You can just stop. And you never know when that experience, that knowledge, whatever, years later could end up coming in handy. And so like I always think it's really important to just explore. If something like piques your curiosity, just pull that thread a little bit and see where it goes. And you never know. And if you stop, it's totally okay. Like there shouldn't be a stigma around like, yeah, it wasn't for me. That's fine.
Yeah, I think the most interesting people in life are the ones who are the most curious. Um, and I recently heard a quote from a director that I follow pretty heavily, and he said, "When people pursue success, their work becomes stagnant, but when they pursue curiosity, their work becomes successful." Um, and I think there's something so special about the curious individual because you're willing to try new things. And when I look back on my life, I I'm thankful that I was able to kind of explore new things. And as you're kind of talking about it, and you shared this, I think, very well. But why do you think it is so important for someone to consistently pursue their curiosities?
That is a good question. Like I know the personal reward part, but the actual importance of it. I mean, I think there's a practical sense where like I know there have been studies done where being like I don't know if you'd call it intellectually active or stimulated, I guess, like can help prevent aging, can help prevent the onset of degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and stuff and dementia because your brain is constantly going. It's not a cure, obviously. I'm not saying anything like that, but there are benefits to being, both of my grandparents. I don't think it's a coincidence, especially they grew up in a time when it's like you will just eat red meat at every meal and full on butter and eggs and like not really the most like Midwest farm cooking for 90 years is not like the most heart healthy food, but they lived well into their 90s. And I think a lot of it, I think so much of it really was because they were just constantly like learning about this, learning about that. My grandpa like got into ham radio, built a giant antenna, like he had been a pilot at one point. They just learning about everything that came out, and the world keeps changing. And maybe that's a good way. Like it's good for your personal development because you never know when these dots will connect, when or how they will connect. And so you're almost just putting tools in your toolbox constantly that you never know when you'll need. And then also as the world keeps changing like faster and faster and faster, the more you indulge your curiosity, it helps you to stay open to those changes instead of like stagnating and kind of walling yourself off. Like, I think we've all known people that, they turned, I don't know, 25 years old in 1996 and they just sort of live in that time. Like they never progress past a certain age, and they're just kind of closed off. Everything after that is bad and evil and or scary. And I think being curious sort of helps you be a part of the world and continue to like explore and understand as stuff changes, and can help you feel less afraid of things changing because it's all just, just like a kid. If you think of a kid, like the whole world is new, everything is crazy and terrifying, but kids are just curious about everything and they just want to know what it is, how it works, why does it do this? And they're not judging it. They're just curious about it. And we kind of lose that as we get older. And I think hanging on to that is a really helpful thing just for for everybody, for the benefit of like society. I wish more people would do that.
Why do you think that we lose that as we get older? Because I think of like a kid who you tell them that they need to do something and they ask the question, why? And
Yeah.
then you give the answer and they ask that question, why? And they keep peering at that question. Why do you think it
Yeah.
is that we lose that over time?
I mean, it's interesting because I taught high school for a long time, and high school students age like 13 to 18, they still kind of have that. They still have that a lot, actually. I shouldn't say kind of. They have that a lot. But it is sort of past that. I guess once you get into adulthood, it kind of goes away. And I was thinking about this a while ago. I think it's because there's a practical side. Like you have work, you have family. There's only so many hours in the day. Like maybe you don't have the luxury of sitting around going like, what do I want to indulge? Like what curiosity? You're kind of just trying to survive and make ends meet and support your family and stuff. I think that's part of it. And then I think it's also you get sort of used to playing to your strengths. You have a job and you're good at it, and you sort of have this skill set, and why would you step outside of that where you're going to be, I don't know, 43 years old and bad at something when you could be, the leader of something and a pro at something. And kids are bad at everything because they have no experience in anything, so they don't have that fear. Just try everything, it's fine. But I think adults, we kind of play to our strengths. You don't want, it sucks to be a beginner. Like, it's not a fun when you're like, oh, I want to get here, but I'm starting here. And it's such a long, there's no way around it besides just, going through it. And I think we just kind of avoid that. But I do think as an adult, when you jump back into that, you find that those muscles are still there and you can still learn new things. You can still build new skills. And the more that you do it as an adult, you kind of remember what it felt like as a kid. And it's like, oh yeah, it's all still there. It's totally fine. I don't have to be amazing at everything. Like I can be a beginner, and that's totally cool. And it's not as scary as it seems to be, but I think maybe a lot of people are scared of it.
In today's fast-paced world, content creation has become an essential tool for connecting with audiences and sharing ideas. Whether you're a filmmaker, a live streamer, or a social media influencer, the quality of your content can make all the difference in capturing and engaging with your audience. That's where Hollyland Technology comes in. As a leading innovator with wireless video transmission, monitors, microphones, and intercom systems, Hollyland offers reliable solutions to capture high-quality content. Whether you're working on a film set, broadcasting live events, or creating content for social media, Hollyland has the tools you need to elevate your production value. Their cutting-edge technology allows you to focus on capturing the perfect content without worrying about technical issues. If you're looking for high-quality wireless solutions, check out Hollyland's product range. Visit their website at hollyland.com to learn more about their products and find the perfect solution for your needs. Make sure to use the code GEAR15 at checkout for an extra 15% off. And thank you to Hollyland for sponsoring this video. Yeah, and going back to the high schoolers being still curious and still wanting to pursue things and pursue that curiosity, going back to you being a high schooler, I think people right now listening to the podcast might think that your trajectory after high school was to become a filmmaker or some kind of audiovisual person because it was something that you were so curious about. But I love your background because you actually jumped straight. You went to school for teaching. Not some creative teacher, but an English teacher. Is that right?
That sweet English degree, yeah.
Yeah. And so while you were going through high school and then obviously getting into college, what was the reasoning to go into teaching and avoid something that seems to be you're really passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think there's a philosophical side. Maybe, I don't know, maybe other people could relate to this. Part of it was just practical. Like, I very much was considering film school, very much wanted to go to a film school, but also knew those are really expensive. Your chance of success is very low, and you have to, even when you are successful, it's not going to be you get your degree and now you have a job. It's like you get your degree and then you work for like 10 years to get into a union to like start at the bottom. Like, there are dues to be paid for a very long time. And there's also crazy work schedules. And, I did work for a number of years at a local TV station from the time I was a teen to like my early 20s. And that 24/7, 365 wacky schedule, I kind of quickly learned, I don't really like this that much. I kind of want like some stability, predictability. And then I didn't have a ton of that growing up. We weren't like super financially well off, and there was a lot of like unpredictability. And so teaching for me was something where I was like, I was always also interested in that. Like, I thought school, even though I had kind of a terrible time in middle school and high school, I thought teaching was cool. I thought school was cool. I was always like, what would, if you're sitting in a class and you're thinking like, my classroom would look like this, or I would do it this way, you might be a good teacher. Like, if you're critiquing what your teacher's doing constantly. And I was doing that. So it's like, okay. And you get to have a positive impact, hopefully. And so I thought like, that's a good career. And then this thing that I love to do can be the thing on the side. Like, I don't have to put the pressure on it to earn a living with a camera or something. I can just enjoy it and make $0 off of it, and it will be fine. And that was kind of, I didn't know that those worlds would end up colliding, but that was the initial decision when, and it's like, do you go to film school? Do you not? And yeah, I mean, a state university was way, way less expensive than a film school would have been.
So you make the decision to become a teacher. You go to school for being a teacher. I want to talk a little bit about just like the importance of what teachers can bring to the table and how much of an impact they can have on their students and the people around them. And I wanted to ask, has there been a teacher or somebody in your life who has taught you that has made a drastic impact for you to make that decision to go be a teacher?
Uh, yeah, for positive and negative, yes.
Okay, yes,
Sometimes,
that's yeah, okay.
sometimes the negatives. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had like one that pops up is my 11th grade English teacher. She was, which is cool because I ended up like working with her later on as a teacher, and it was cool to be able to go like, oh my god. But she was somebody who sort of like leveled up expectations and let me know that like you're good at this. Don't set the bar low for yourself. Set the bar high for yourself. And I'm setting the bar high. And sometimes she would set standards so high that I felt like I could never meet them. And I realized what she was doing was she was sort of setting the bar higher than she knew I could reach. But then even if I didn't quite reach that, I would soar over the bar that she knew I could reach. So if she set the bar here, I would have met it or maybe gone a little under. But if she set it really high, I didn't meet that, but I still went above where I might have thought I could go. And I was like, oh, that's a cool little trick that you did. And teachers are full of good, like psychological tricks like that. And that she just always stands out as somebody who just sort of like really cared, knew what she was doing, cared about students, and did stuff like that very individually for different students. So it wasn't, yeah, there's a class of 40 people, but it's 40 individuals, and it's very hard to, and plus then you have like 6 or 7 periods of 40 people. And it's crazy to be able to personally figure things out like that for so many of them. And that's right around like 11th grade. You're really starting to think what you're doing. And it's just like, dang, that is really cool. I would like to do something like that.
So you make that decision, and then you have the opportunity to be that kind of teacher for students. How did that feel?
Yeah, hopefully there is a lot of pressure. It feels so weird at first, and a good lesson, a lesson that I learned actually, because I started teaching in 2010, or I guess I started actually like being in the classroom in 2010, but I started like going to school for teaching prior to that, right around the time that Conan was taking over the Tonight Show and then like getting fired from the Tonight Show. And I watched an interview with him because he was doing so many at the time. It's like before he had a podcast and everything, where you could just hear it all the time. And it was like, wow, a Conan interview. This is crazy. Um, and he talked about it felt really weird to host the Tonight Show. And throughout his career, he had these moments where things just felt weird, like hosting the late night show before that, writing on The Simpsons, working on SNL, whatever. And he would just act as if, like, yes, it feels really weird, but if I just act as if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, it will help. And so teaching was crazy because I remember the first day, I remember my first day in a classroom, and I'm like, I think I was like 24 years old. And like, as a senior English class, the kids are 18. Like we're not that far apart like, in terms of like, we were all in school at some point. When I graduated, you guys were in like elementary school. Like we were in the same school district at one point, and now I'm supposed to be your teacher. And I remember it felt so weird, and nobody told me about that. Nobody told me what it's going to feel like when the bell rings, the door closes, and you just have a room full of people just staring at you, and you, whoa, it feels super weird. And so I remember just thinking, no, students come into a classroom expecting there to be a teacher at the front. They know there's going to be a teacher who's going to tell them to do stuff and tell them about stuff. It feels super weird for me to be that teacher right now. But if I just act as if that is normal and that's what I'm supposed to do, they don't have to know. It's like a bear. They don't have to know that I'm super scared of them. I can just do my thing. And it took a long time to kind of get your footing and get your rhythm and stuff. But that really helped. And I think especially, the beginning too, no matter how prepared you are for something like that, not only will you make mistakes, but you make mistakes in front of people. And the people you're making mistakes in front of are teenagers who will not hesitate to point out that you made a mistake. So it's a very humbling experience. And I learned it very quickly. It kind of taught like, okay, I just need to let them know I made a mistake. And sometimes, like I remember like I think we were a couple weeks into like this project or the system of doing things in that first year, and it just like wasn't working. Like kids weren't into it. I felt like I was pushing a boulder uphill every day, and I was like, I think we all need to reevaluate this. It feels like this train has gone off the tracks a little bit. What if we just shift gears? Like, and it was like literally, let's just talk about, we all know this isn't working. So let's find something that works. And we kind of shifted to like a different type of project, or I forget exactly what it was, but it was just like admitting to them, like, yeah, I kind of messed up. But I don't want to mess up and I would like this to be better. And I think that really helped. Like, students could see that you're not trying to be God who knows everything. They also see that you actually do care. You're not trying to torture them. Like, oh, you're miserable doing this. I'm miserable doing this. How about we don't do this? Like, let's do something else that we actually want to do. And so that learning experience of like, it's okay to fail publicly. It's okay to change things publicly. And then actually building a skill set behind that, where you don't have to do that as often. And it's just part of it. And that really helped. And I think that helped students to know that I actually did care about their experience in the class. Like, I want them to learn the stuff, but I also want them to not totally dread this time that we have to spend together every day. And, I know you have 7 other classes or whatever in some cases, and sports and family and all this stuff. But like, if you could have an hour that you look forward to, that'd be pretty cool. And that was kind of, that was a good starting point, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you were still exploring that curiosity even in the classroom. And the reason I bring up all of the teaching is because I really think you have a very valuable background because you taught students for so long. And I think what teachers bring to the table, I think teachers bring creativity to the table every single day. And that's not something that we normally talk about, because you have to understand how some students learn one way and other students learn another way. But the problem is you can't always teach individual students different ways. And so it's been really cool to hear that you were able to be open and honest with the classroom and explore that curiosity and bring everybody to the table and say, hey, this isn't working. What can we do that's different in order to create a better experience for students to learn, and a better experience for you to not feel like you're stressed out and wanting to quit your job.
Right. Yeah, of course. I would like to keep doing this career. Yeah, no, that's huge. And that kind of goes, in anything. Like, it could be teaching, but it could be any kind of job. If you feel that you're being dictated to, it creates a very different feeling than if you feel that you're part of something and it's a team. And obviously, like with teaching, there's a teacher who's the adult and the responsible party, and there's students who are kids. So there is this power dynamic, this authority dynamic, but you can also be, especially, in my case, I don't know what it'd be like teaching first graders. It'd be a very different situation maybe, but with high school kids, it was really cool, especially once I moved into digital media, because I taught, it was a career tech program that went for 3 to 4 years. So I'd have students either from 9th or 10th grade all the way through graduation. And seeing somebody go from like a squirrely freshman straight out of middle school, where it's just like, please, like, you would see them walking down the hall to come into class, and you're just like, oh, like, I know I wanted to make their experience in my class, but now I'm dreading this class because I have to deal with this person every day for this hour, to like just this amazing young adult that's ready to actually go do something in the world, even if it's not related to what the class is about. But like, seeing them find something they care about, like mature into a young adult, and then be excited about going out and doing something was super cool. And just like, I don't know, getting to be a part of that is really neat. And the only way that you can get someone to do that for years on end is to let them feel like they also have a say in what's happening and they're also a part of it. And it's not just, they're not just it's not boot camp where they're just getting yelled at for 4 years, because nobody wants to do that. So, yeah.
It's been really cool to see, like, on the YouTube platform for you, you've been really honest and open with your audience, whether that's how you approach things, that's how gear is either sent to you or not sent to you, or you bought it, whether you're being paid or not. And I was going to ask this question, and I feel like you're kind of already answering it, but have you always felt this need to be upfront and honest with people? And if so, why?
That's the answer is yes, I have. I was raised Catholic, and I think because of that, you just feel guilty for everything. And so it's like you're supposed to just like, I don't want to go to confession, so I'm just gonna like be honest all the time. But that's a good question. I like being open and honest because it's like, here's all my cards out on the table. And I like it if I feel like the other person or people I'm dealing with are doing the same thing, because then we can actually do something. I don't like it when it's like, oh, well, I'm kind of doing this, but then read between the lines and you mean this. It's like, I feel like nothing happens and nothing gets done. But when it's like, here's where I'm coming from, that's where you're coming from, cool, let's do something now. Like, it's like, honestly, it's just simple and practical and feels like it's the right ethical, moral thing to do, to just be open. Like, I don't know. I mean, isn't that like the first thing you learn when you're a kid? Like, just don't lie, just be open and honest. And I don't know, it just seems like what you should do. I don't know.
Well, it seems self-explanatory to you, but I think to a lot of people, I don't think that's a common practice we see. I think a lot of people are really closed off in the world, and so it's really rejuvenating to see your work and you being so honest and open with your audience, especially with like, I mean, you did your video on your ethics statement and how you approach that. And there was something about watching that for me that is just so nice when I can see other people be authentic and honest. It allows room for the reciprocating person to be honest and open with them. And we know that communication is key. And it just helps a better working environment, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing too with YouTube specifically, is like, at least for me, I want to keep doing it. Like, I don't want it to end. I want to keep doing it as long as possible. And a good way to make sure that doesn't happen is to start being dishonest, to start selling out the channel, which I know that sounds like, I don't know, some hipster like, you want to sell out or whatever. But it's like, yeah, when every video you do is a sponsored thing, it's really hard for your own voice to come through. And when it feels like there's brands and stuff, which, by the way, thank you, GearFocus, for sponsoring one of my videos last year. I do appreciate that very much. But like, there are times when it can work out, and there are times when it's just a lot harder to find those things and to work that out. It's not the same as, you will see people who just say yes to everything that comes their way, and it sometimes gets them into hot water or sometimes causes a lot of stress. But it's also like, then it becomes, you're watching the home shopping network. Like, I know you're telling me this JVC camera is better than your studio camera, but I know that it's not. And like, it's weird that you're telling me it is. And that, I think, is a way to very quickly lose trust. Takes so long to build and so little time to destroy and lose, that the openness and honest transparency that I try to like go for is hopefully something that helps things stay sustainable for a long time, because I would really like to keep doing this for a long time.
I am just so curious about this because you go from being an English teacher to all of a sudden being offered a position to take over media and teach that. And in your Teacher of the Year video, you had mentioned that you said yes without hesitation. Now, looking back now, why do you think you said yes without hesitating?
That's a great question. I mean, I, I think I don't know. I didn't even know what the program. What happened was, I was teaching English. I was teaching 10th grade English at the time, and it was like 6 weeks into a new school year. I just built a brand new classroom and everything. And then one morning, the principal called me into his office and was like, "Yeah, the person who's leaving our media program, or person who's one of the heads of our media program, just let us know he's leaving." They knew about my background. I was teaching yearbook at the time, so like, I was also doing a little bit of like media-ish stuff at the school. And he's like, "I know your background. Do you want this position?" And I knew we had like a media program on campus, but I honestly didn't even know really what it was. And I was just like, "Yeah, for sure, 100%." And I don't know. I never even thought about that until this moment, why I never even questioned it. I think because it's like, if I think about it, teaching English, like finding an English position isn't terribly difficult. It's a core subject. Most schools have them. Like, you want to teach 10th grade English, you could probably teach 10th grade English somewhere. But the chance to move into like not every school even has a media program. And then if they do, it's like one teacher teaches it and that's it. So it's like, it's a very scarce thing. And to suddenly have the chance to do that, it was just like, yeah, I could go back teaching English anytime, but this probably won't happen again. That teacher has been there for 10 years. Like, is it going to be 10 more years before there's an opening again? I don't know. Maybe that had something to do with it because it's like, yeah, and it's just, I don't know, the idea of being able to, I don't know what I thought the program was, but whatever it is, like digital media, getting to do whatever I thought that was, just sounded awesome. And then it and then it turned out the teacher I was replacing had the wrong credential the whole time. Because that was a reason they were like, oh, for some reason his English credential like counts as this, and you have an English credential, so you could go do it. And I was like, okay, cool. And then the district is like, yeah, no, it's not the same. This isn't an English class. Like you need a career technical credential. And I was like, okay. That previous weekend, I had been on a bike ride, and I was stopping for like water in the parking lot of the campus where I went to a lot of my college classes at. And I was literally looking up at the thing going, I'm so glad I don't have to go to class anymore. Like, I can't believe I went to night classes. I put all these hours. Like, it was literally on Saturday. Yeah, that was on Saturday. I was literally like, I'm so glad I don't have to go to school. By Tuesday, I was back at campus, like enrolling in another credential program because there was something of like, if you can get this emergency credential and then finish a program within a year, you can then continue to teach the program. So I was like, cool, back to full-time school. Yay. But it was super worth it, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
You had this skill and this background in audiovisual. You knew your way around a camera. You knew your way around audio. You're now teaching classes, and then COVID hits. And now schools, organizations, all have to learn how to do things online overnight. And as a teacher, somebody who's also creative, what was going through your head when these kind of moments started unfolding?
Yeah. So I think the timeline's kind of key there because I started teaching digital media in 2012 and then COVID was 2020. So fortunately, there was a long time to build up a bit of a skill set there. And in 2017, I started a YouTube channel. So for those 3 years up to 2020, I'd also been like putting together a home studio and building up my own skills. Because even though I knew my way around a camera and stuff, there was a learning curve. Like jumping back into teaching kids, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to edit in Final Cut Pro. I don't know how to shoot video on a DSLR. Like I kind of was a little bit rusty and needed to knock the dust off a bit. And then when COVID happened, the channel was up and running already, making videos all the time. And I remember that day, Friday the 13th, March 13th. It was that evening is when I think the whole world got notices, but we got our notice that like there's no school for at least a couple of weeks, online stuff. And I remember we already had like Google Classroom, like online classroom thing. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a video real quick. So even that night, I like came in here and recorded a video that was like a very awkward, like, hey, I saw you guys earlier today. Probably not gonna see you again for a while. And just sort of like acknowledging the weirdness of the situation. And then it's a weird thing. Like you have to do your job remotely online with audio and video, and you just happen to have an audio and video studio in your house that you use all the time. So it's sort of unfair advantage to me in that regard. But that was cool because then it was like what I got to do was, I knew that kids are sitting on Chromebooks all day, going to all their other classes where they have a Chromebook where the webcam's down here, like looking up their nose, or like it's just a forehead in the shot. And then you could come to my class, which was a digital media class, so it should be good. And it's like, okay, we have multiple camera angles, we have good audio, like you want graphics on screen, like, sound effects, like the whole thing. I knew that would really stand out for students. And then I also knew other teachers would start asking questions. And I guess it goes back to curiosity. People do not care what you tell them. Like, you should get a good camera for streaming. Nobody cares. They will care when they try to do it and they go, my picture looks terrible. what do I do? And now they're asking the question and then you can help them. So it was like, I knew that if I was doing like way over the top, extra, as the kids said, in my class, I knew other teachers, at least at my school, would go like, wait, how are you doing that? How, they don't want to do this, but they want to do a tiny version of it or have audio that's not terrible or something. And it's like, oh yeah, here's how you could do that. And that was really cool because it sort of helped, it like really validated the skill set, I guess, that because I'd been teaching kids this thing and it's like, yeah, it's a career tech program. And, I'd been advocating for years about why this is valuable, not just because you want to go be a Hollywood director, but because it's all about communication. It's all about critical thinking and problem solving. And you need that in any career field. And when every career field now needed immediate audio, video, like leveling up, it was kind of like validating of, yeah, okay. And that's not going to stay that extreme forever, but parts of that have not gone away, even as things kind of like reopened and everything over the years. But it was a cool like affirmation of, yeah, these skills are really important and it does matter. And the cool part is it got people excited about it because out of necessity, so many people needed a camera or a microphone or something, and they needed it for their job. But then they're kind of like, this looks kind of cool. What if I recorded a podcast episode? What if I did? And so many people discovered a thing they would have never even tried otherwise because they had to for their job. And that was really cool. I guess if there had to be a cool part of COVID, I guess that would be it.
I was just about to say the one I think maybe like cool thing that I saw out of COVID was just seeing people kind of out of a place of curiosity or boredom, picking up new hobbies. And discovering new things that they had never cared to even explore before. And were there things during that time where you were able to communicate with your kids, your students, that were they curious about things that you were interested in, and were you able to kind of reintroduce them? You're teaching these classes too, so also they're probably already interested in it. But was there some cool growth that you were able to see in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, nothing would compare to like being physically in a classroom with students. There's a lot of jobs where it's like you could totally do this remotely. Teaching really does face to face. It makes the world of difference. And then also like our school, it was a really cool program with a decent budget, but we were a Title I school, which is basically like it's something like 90% of the students are like below poverty levels. So it's not like kids are going home to like the nicest places and they have all the resources. It's a lot of kids who are like, okay, they're going home to a very small place that's like probably got multiple siblings, parents have to work. Now the older high school kids taking care of all the siblings and trying to do their classes. And it's like, you're kind of competing with that. But a cool thing, it's one of those like, don't beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness things where I was like, okay, the program I was teaching at the time was one I had started from scratch in 2016. And so there's, I'd been ordering equipment, putting together all this stuff. And I was like, we have like a whole studio of cameras and everything. Like it's just B&H photo, basically. That's just sitting there because nobody can use it right now. And it's like, so I started putting together these little kits and like kids could always rent out and check out equipment during class, but this was sort of hard. And like, the school would do food. So like once or twice a week, families could go through and pick up meals for the week. And so I started putting together like these kind of like kits, emailing with students what they needed to work on, what they might want to work on, what I thought they might like. And then like they would get like their meal and then like a camera and a microphone and some lenses or what, like an AV kit also. So just so they could, and it was like, maybe it's tied to a project, but maybe it's not. I just kind of figured like if you have this stuff sitting at home and you have nothing else to do, what kid isn't going to go like at least turn on the camera, point it at something? We had some laptops that they could check out to edit on. And some kids had their own computers and stuff too. So it was like giving them the resources and the time to just explore stuff on their own with no consequence. Like you're not being graded on this. It's not for a project. It's just kind of like go have fun with it. Was actually really cool. And that's something that probably couldn't have happened. That much time to explore probably couldn't have happened in any other way. I don't think.
What's so interesting hearing you talk is that you have always been curious and creative, and you adapted that to be able to equip other people to become curious and creative by putting things together for them to sit at home with a microphone and be like, I'm bored out of my mind. I'm going to learn something today.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, that's a big part of it for sure.
you
For
had your
sure.
hand in that, in a really interesting, valuable program. And I say valuable because I went to a very similar school, didn't have a lot to offer. Um, and the program was called Impact that you've created. Is that correct? Yeah. And with this conversation about impact, you made one of your first YouTube videos talking about building out this program and the studio. And I wanted to ask, what was your reasoning behind the video?
That is a very good question. Well, yeah, so that's a great question. I don't know. Sometimes you just want to make a video, I guess. The real answer is because that was 2016, 2017-ish when I we had our campus had been rebuilt, and so my classroom was brand new, and there was a studio space where we did a daily broadcast, and like kind of cobbled together some stuff to get through the initial part of a school year. But then during that summer break, I was like, I basically wanted to build like a late night talk show set, and so I spent most of that summer doing that and building like this. It's something I'm still like to this day most proud of, like this legit set from start to finish that was functional. And I guess they're still using it in some form today, so that's cool. But I had also been watching a lot of Casey Neistat, and it's hard to watch Casey's daily vlogs and not want to pick up a camera and like just record what you're doing. And something like that is so innately visual and interesting that it was just like, yeah, I had wanted to, I had started my YouTube channel. I'd wanted to do stuff, but it felt very weird to put myself front and center. So if I had a cool thing to talk about, it was like the video is not about me. The video is about this thing, and I'm just kind of the conduit that like, here, your attention flows through me to this thing, and that really helped a lot. So I think that was probably my impulse. It was like, I know the studio is interesting, and that means I don't have to be center stage because this is cool.
As I watched that video, I realized just how much you genuinely do care about students and care about people. And again, I think it comes back to that maybe a sense of vulnerability or openness that you share with people. But I think that speaks so many volumes to an audience, whether that's a YouTube audience or a classroom. You've really done such a good job at conveying how you feel and what you want to accomplish within the space that you're in. Again, whether that's a classroom or whether that's a YouTube
That is
audience.
like the nicest thing to hear. Thank you. Thank you. That means, I don't even know that's like the biggest compliment. So I really, really appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, that's a hard, I know that growing up, like, believe it or not, being an AV nerd wasn't always cool. And so, uh, I very much felt like like an outcast for so long, and especially pre-internet, it's like you didn't easily know that there was a whole world out there. It was just like, I do not fit in with anything that's happening around me, and I feel really bad about it, and people are kind of making me feel really bad about it too. And luckily, as I got older, I kind of realized, like, yeah, that's true. There, people around me weren't. I didn't fit in with them, but there were people in the world, thanks to the internet and being able to realize that, where I totally fit in, and we were just in different places, and that was kind of an amazing thing to realize. And I think part of it was like, as a teacher, I could really recognize the students who felt the same way. And it was just it's kind of like, if I had the power to help them feel a little less terrible, I really wanted to use that power, because I knew how powerful that is, to like one little the same way that one little comment can tear someone down and affect them for the rest of their life, it can also do the opposite, or it could be the catalyst to do something really good. And it's like, God, like as a teacher working with students in these like, was it formidable? Not formidable, formative, formative years. Yeah, that's the word. It's like, wait, it is formidable, but these formative years where everything really does affect somebody, and you can just kind of be a consistent source of like support, encouragement, introduction to new things. To me, it just like, it almost just kind of felt good to know that that students had that, like they had something that I didn't have much of growing up. And I don't know why, but for some reason it just felt good to do that. And hopefully, hopefully it helped.
I think it definitely has helped. And the reason I say that is you go from being a teacher in a classroom to becoming a teacher on YouTube. I say that because personally, I have learned a lot of things watching your YouTube videos, and they've like undeniably helped me understand like audio. I'm a very visual person. I can do video, but like learning audio has been new and fun. And it's been kind of cool to see how you were a teacher in a classroom and now you're like in a way a teacher in a YouTube space, and kind of talking about fun things and having unique conversations, but also being able to give tips and tricks on certain things that you've learned about the Rodecaster Pro and all of those things. How has that felt making that transition?
It's been great because I really did, like, I didn't miss the staff meetings. I didn't miss the politics. I left teaching in March of 2021, so it was still during the pandemic, like before schools were open again. And that really was it. I think if schools had never closed, I don't know that I could have ever like stepped away. But one thing about the pandemic, as much as I tried, it also did take away so much of the good part of teaching and just left the endless like staff meetings, bureaucracy, politics, the vitriol towards teachers. And it was just like, I don't know if I can do this for 20 more years or however long was left. And the YouTube channel was starting to pick up. And it's like, what it really was too was, I love the program I'm teaching in. It's important to me, but it's also one administrative or legislative decision away from disappearing because somebody might not value it the same way I do, versus my YouTube channel. Yes, stuff can happen with the platform, but everything on it, everything I'm building is me investing in myself. And it's like, if you have to choose between investing in yourself or something for somebody else that they might not even care about, I just kind of wanted to invest in my own thing. But it really sucked to think, oh, now I'm going to leave, like I like the teaching part of teaching, even though that became a smaller and smaller part of the job. And it was like my wife and some of my friends who were kind of like, we still get to teach. It's just different. And that really did help to kind of think of like, yeah, okay, the channel can be a way. It's not the same in the exact same way, but there's no lesson plans, there's no evaluations, there's no staff meetings, there's no grading. So in a way, it's kind of better. And I can really just, whatever my whim happens to be, I can just do that. And it's amazing to think that can still be beneficial to people. And that's the magic of YouTube, honestly, is that everybody has something like that they can share. And whether it's entertaining or educational or edutating, it's like there's some kind of benefit to it. And I don't know, YouTube's just amazing. I'm glad that I get to be a part of it.
It is a phenomenal platform, and kind of thinking about like the idea of you investing in yourself. What are you hoping that your YouTube channel will be in the next 5 years?
Still existing. That's my biggest I honestly, like, my wife and I talk about this a lot. Like, I don't really have, I have felt in the past a sense of guilt because I don't really have big plans. Like, sometimes people are like, I'm hiring a team, I'm building a studio, I'm doing whatever. I'm like, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. Like, yeah. And that is kind of what I want to keep doing. I don't know where it will go, like stuff changes and evolves, but I love what I get to do and I want to do that. And the thing that I would love to do even more of is really try to like grow my own creative voice and not worry about the numbers and not worry about oh, is this going to affect revenue or something? And just like have as much fun, try to be as creative as possible, and just enjoy the platform as much as possible, and hope that that comes through, that is something that can lead to success on the platform. Um, and to be able to do that, that's what I would really love to keep doing. Like, stay the course, basically.
I almost feel bad asking that question because I myself am the person when somebody asks me what I want to do in 5 years, I'm like, man, I don't even know what next year looks like, you know? Um, and so I do feel bad. I am just curious if like some people have like an idea, but it sounds to me like you're just wanting to enjoy the process.
Yeah, I mean that's like I keep mentioning my wife because we talk about this stuff constantly, and it's like I think in the past year or two, she and I have really realized like there is no finish line. If anything, we're kind of at the finish line. Like, we're healthy, we're relatively young, we get to do what we want to do. Like, what more do we want? Like, I would just want to enjoy this. Like, what else am I going to ask for? So yeah, just enjoying this, and then being aware of cool opportunities and cool things to explore. And like, I've always been super aware of the finite amount of time that a person has on the earth. And it's like, yeah, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. So I'd really like to take advantage of being able to explore and enjoy, and, check out the stuff that I want to check out while I can. And I don't know where that goes. I don't know the practical side of that, but I don't think bad things will happen. And that's what she and I kind of always go for. Is like, we're not trying to get to a finish line. We're trying to literally just enjoy the journey, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah, I want to ask one more question, and I think it like pairs so well with what you just said of somebody who's wanting to start out, and here you are looking at you almost feel like you've made it to the finish line and you're just trying to enjoy that. Um, Out of all the things that you've learned and the adaptation that you've had in your life, what is something that you would tell somebody who is into creativity and they're wanting to pursue it in some way, shape, or form? And after all of the things that you've learned, what's one piece of advice that you would just love to be able to share with them?
It's sort of going to be ironic because I'm telling somebody this, but it would be like, don't let other people's voices affect what you do. So don't listen to anyone except me right now. Like, because I think, especially if it's an online thing, it's so easy to see what other people are doing, hear what they're doing, hear from comments here, and you're just sort of torn, and you have this loudness in your head at all times, and it can kind of overshadow your own creative voice in a big way. And like, it's not even about, like, in a way, it's easy to go like, oh yeah, I'm at the finish line because I get to do this full time and all that. But honestly, like 6 years ago, just making like that video about the YouTube studio with the little point and shoot camera, that was also like kind of the finish line. Like, I get to make a video about something that's really cool. Like, I was already there. And I think when somebody's starting out with something creative, you want to learn and you want to get better and you want to be inspired by people, but really listening to your own inner creative voice is important, and that might mean shutting things out. I did a thing I never thought I would do a couple weeks ago, which was like completely like shut off everything for 2 full weeks. Like, I didn't check an email. Maybe I didn't get back to you for a while. I didn't check anything for YouTube. I just like literally like off the grid in a way that I don't think I've ever been. And I was somebody who was like, oh, I'm not really affected by any of that stuff. And it was like, after just a few days, it was like, oh my God, my brain is so quiet now. It's just my thoughts, which is kind of scary, but it's also like, I'm having I'm having these ideas that like I didn't have room for before, and then kind of sticking with that for longer and longer, and past the point of it becoming uncomfortable. It was really like, oh my God, I don't want to like go back to having everybody's voice in my head all the time, because then the thing I'm making is just a version of what I think somebody else thinks that they want. instead of the thing that I want. And we all have something interesting. Like your own individual experience and perspective is what makes it interesting, and trying to snuff that out to fit into a mold that other people make isn't doing yourself a creative service. So like embracing your own experience and your own creativity with all of its flaws and imperfections and everything, gaps in knowledge, whatever that might be, is really important, because that's going to let you make the thing that nobody else can make, because only you could do it.
That's beautiful. I don't think there's a better way to end the podcast with that. Yeah, I won't even say anything in regards to that. I think that was cool. So well put together. Bye. Tom, thank you for being on the podcast, man. This was such an enjoyable conversation.